And we are already live.
Yes.
Greetings, chess players. My name is Chris Torres. This is Daily Chess Musings, and I am here today to share with you a special Paul Morphy chess game that you probably haven't seen before. This one's very much off the beaten path. It is not one that has been published in any instructional books. And I don't think there's any video lessons on it yet either. The game in question today is Paul Morphy versus the Allies. But this was in 1859. Not 1858 in Paris, 1859 in Boston. Paul Morphy went to Boston for just 1 week, and he played a lot of these consultation games. He enjoyed this style of chess. What a consultation game is, there would be a team of opponents, and they would be allowed to consult with each other, to converse with each other, to discuss their ideas, and then Paul Morphy would be left to his own devices. The Allies in this case were, let me look them up. Everybody just calls it the Allies, but the Allies consisted of Mr. Hammond, who happened to be the New England chess champion at the time in 1859, and his friends Mr. Ware, Mr. Rabuski, Mr. Stone, and Mr. Everet. And I did a little bit of research on all of these characters and found out that, in fact, they all played chess regularly in the area. So they were all good chess players, like you or I are good chess players. And their job is to team up against Paul Morphy and try and beat him. So, without further ado, let's take a look at the game. There's, uh-oh. Why is this not right? Hang on. Oh, that's even more not right. Megan! Let me see if I can get my wife to fix some of these so we can see our chessboard. Megan! I need you! And that way the photo of Morphy and the Allies is not in the way of the chessboard. And voila. That looks great. Now I will show you the game. All right. So Paul Morphy, as he does most oftentimes, starts with e4. And the Allies, again, that's Mr. Hammond, Mr. Ware, Mr. Rabuski, Mr. Stone, and Mr. Everet. They play e5. Then we have, so both sides get a pawn in the center, control the center square. White's controlling d5, black's controlling d4. By control, we mean the pawn is threatening that square. You're controlling that square. Knight f3. The knight is now threatening e5 and fighting for control of d4. And then knight c6. All this is quite common. Black's knight is defending e5 and super controlling. This is a Coach Chris term, super controlling d4, because there are now two things controlling that square. And now Paul Morphy plays bishop to b5. Interesting. Why is this interesting? Well, let me back up a little bit. At the time, Paul Morphy loved to play the King's Gambit. That's e4, e5, f4. And he still, as he did early in his career, loved to play the Italian, which is bishop c4, the Italian game, or the Gioco Piano. The Spanish game is a little bit different. One extra square, instead of targeting the belly button right off the bat, you're threatening the knight, which is supporting the black's control of the dark squares, right? So you're trying to undermine their control of the dark squares right away. If this pawn moves up, you get a nice pin on this c6 knight. And bishops love to pin knights. And now the allies play a6. This is known as the Morphy defense. Certainly, you can just take. And this is known as the exchange variation. There's nothing wrong with just taking. In fact, why don't we go ahead and explore that just for a moment? So if white takes, then excuse me, then black could take back. Usually it's best to take back toward the center, but you could take back dxc6 as well, and that means and in this case that's better. The queen has an open line, the bishop has an open line, the other bishop has an open line, right? And then you don't want to just grab this pawn right now. That's important for me to explain to you. You can castle if you're white, and then think about taking the pawn. If you think, this is a beginner mistake here, by the way. If you take the knight, and they take back, and then you go ahead and take the e5 pawn, black could just simply play queen e7, and then they're threatening your knight, the pawn, and indirectly your king at the end of this whole file. Knight f3, queen takes e4, and we have to start liking black's position just a little bit, because his ability to develop is less. His bishop's still blocked in, right? Black's bishops can come out. He can't castle. Losing the right to castle, having easier development, I think black is slightly better. So you don't want to, in the Ruy Lopez, to make a long story short, you don't want to simply eliminate this knight to just quickly get greedy and grab this pawn. It won't end well for you. All right. So then let's see. Yeah, so Morphy does not play the exchange variation. He backs up, bishop a4, and this is, you know, the book move, very common. Most liked move. The a6 line, the Morphy defense, is very common. And then they actually play the Caro variation, which is attacking it again. So white should be happy because then their bishop can come here and threaten the belly button. And black should be happy because then their bishop can get on the long diagonal. So both sides should be happy. Yeah, have a reason to be happy in the Caro variation of the Morphy defense. But before we you know, talk about that, instead of the Morphy defense, so let's start over. We'll throw in a little bit of Ruy Lopez opening knowledge in this lesson as well. So again, we have the Ruy Lopez, the Spanish game. And right here, yeah, black could simply play knight f6. There's no reason not to. If you're white and you don't want to play, this is known as the Berlin defense. If you don't want to play the Berlin defense and possibly get to the famous Berlin endgame, and I'll show you that in a moment, you could simply just play knight c3 here, and then we could transpose to a 4 knights, right? So if you don't want to do castle here, that's totally okay. You could just transpose to a 4 knights. There's no shame in that. But the famous Berlin defense goes something like this. Bishop takes, pawn takes, dx e5, knight f5, and then see the queens are going to trade, right? Queen takes, king takes. And this is really the starting point for the Berlin endgame, which stems out of the Berlin defense. And I have quite a few lessons including the Anand Carlsen World Championship match that goes through several variations of the Berlin game and the Berlin defense. So that's if you like an early endgame. You might go Berlin if you're black. But if you are like me and like an early attack, you might play Schliemann here. Whoa, the Schliemann defense is very exciting. Is white? I don't recommend taking this right away. You could also, push with d4. What I like to do, because I recognize how powerful this attack is, I play d3 here. Support my center pawn. And then if you're black, fx e4, dx e4, and then knight f6, castle, and bishop c5. And black has a little lead in minor piece development. The position is not symmetrical. White has good scope already on their queen because there's no pawn in front and is already castled. Black has yet to castle. It's much sharper. The Schliemann is much sharper than the Berlin defense. So if you like attacking chess and your opponent plays the Ruy Lopez against you, you could try playing the Schliemann. All right. Now, if you play a6, you're getting into the heart of the Ruy Lopez, the heart of it. There's just a ton of studied games following, what happens after a6. Again, if you're white, you can take. When they take back, you castle. You don't grab the center pawn. We talked about that. But Morphy backed up. He keeps his bishop, which most people do. And then b5 is not the most popular move, but is a fine move. And then, there's like a lot of other options. Just real fast. Like I said, I'm throwing in a lot of Ruy Lopez info here. So you could play knight f6, which is the main line of the Morphy defense, and then white could castle and black could just play bishop e7. You could also, let me check my windows, make sure. Oh, good, we're still good. You could also, right here, you could also just play d6, and that's the modern Steinitz. And again, white could castle, and then you could throw b5. But see, d6 has already been played, so you're able to get this bishop is a dual threat piece now. We don't know which direction it's going to go. And then white would retreat back to b3. And again, that's the modern Steinitz. A lot of times here in the modern Steinitz, I like to keep the bishop question open, so I play knight f6, because I'd want to develop that anyways. And then I'll play bishop e7 next as black. And then maybe I'll answer the question as to where my c8 bishop's going to go. Is it going to go here, or is it going to come out here? Long diagonal or the pin? White doesn't know. I like to keep them guessing. All right, but here we go in the Caro variation, named after Marcus Caro, of Caro-Kann fame. Bishop b3 is what Paul Morphy plays. And then bishop c5 is what the Allies play. That's right. We're looking at the Morphy versus the Allies. And now, Morphy right here, remember, he likes to play the Italian. So he plays a very Italian-looking move. Just like in the Yoko piano, you play classical Yoko. You play c3 with the idea of d4, right? And there's like an extra bonus here of playing this, and that is that you don't get force traded with your bishop. It has a nice retreat square if need be. But, this primarily is to push to d4. And let's see what they do. The Allies played the d6 move. So it's a lot like the modern Steinitz, except that the bishop's out on c5, which is kind of a big difference, actually. And then Morphy plays d4, of course. And then black's bishop goes back to b6. This is a mistake. More often than not, when your opponent scoots to d4 and is threatening forking a center pawn and your bishop, more often than not, like way more often, 9 times out of 10, you want to take. You want to take because when they take back, it opens up extra possibilities like a check, right? Or if you take and they take back, it opens up extra possibilities. It's, you know, if you retreat, you're limiting your possibilities, and oftentimes in practice, the extra center pawn ends up burning you somehow. You'll get in trouble, and we see that in this game. So bishop b6, ex d4. You know, we could. You know what? We can look at ex d4 a little better, right? Why not? So if they play ex d4, and then white plays cx d4, then there's a couple things that could happen here. One thing that could happen is, let's see, what do I have? Well, I mean, the bishop could go to b4 check, right? There's nothing wrong with that. And then Kasparov played knight c3, knight f6, castle, castle. And this is Gary Kasparov versus the Chambers of Michael, London, and it's a 1993 game. I believe he was also playing a consultation game. And play continued, bishop b7, and then Gary plays knight d5, adding double pressure, and quickly gets a winning advantage. So you can look at that game on your own. Again, that's Gary Kasparov versus Chamber of Michael, which I believe is maybe a church chess club, and it was played in London. All right. So, but here in 1859, they, go back a little further. They retreated, bishop b6. And that is not the best idea. So Morphy could do a couple things here, but he realizes, hey, I can castle and black cannot. I can castle, black cannot. So he goes ahead, starts opening up the center. Now, if they take back, we could take, and then in order to maintain their ability to castle, the Allies would have to undevelop a knight, basically, moving it to the back rank to recapture, right? And then white could come up here and take something else. We'll look at that in a moment. But the Allies play queen e7. And this was actually a little mistake. It's actually better, in my opinion. I mean, they're a little troubled because of their retreat of their bishop. Like I said, this extra center pawn gave white extra abilities. So, stepping back, right here, instead of queen e7, after white takes the pawn, they could simply take back. Now, you might be saying, don't you lose your ability to castle, so forth and so on? Well, yeah. Or you undevelop your knight, right? We talked about that. Undevelop the knight. And then there goes your center pawn. And then black gets a knight developed. Now watch what happens, though. This is kind of magical. This is under attack. So I believe, strong chess players, Paul Morphy being one of them, would simply play f3, because you're controlling the light squares that these pieces want to use. And you defend your center pawn. And then black can castle, see, but f3 is a slow move, right? And then if you're a strong player, as Morphy was, you want to play a4, because then you're threatening nonsense like smack, smack, boom, right? and then they lose a rook. But black could strike back at the center. When you're being attacked on the flank, it's good to strike back at the center. This is, you know, the majority of the time, if you're being attacked on the flank, try striking back in the center if you can. So Morphy moves his knight back, or would have, I believe. This didn't happen in the actual game, but I believe it very well could have. Bishop e7, bishop c2. And then black can finally get their knight out. And we start seeing that white is up a pawn, but black's pieces are developed and his rooks are unified, right? We start seeing that black is actually the one who has a pretty big lead in development. And I think that would have surprised Morphy had this happened. I think he was just satisfied with exchanging rooks and taking the center pawn. I think he would have been a little surprised, because then if ax b5, well, the threat is no longer to win an undefended rook. It's defended a couple times, in fact. But watch this. Now, if you're black, you could play knight takes e4. Whoa! Exclaim, exclaim. And then fx e4, bishop takes e4. And now the king, Morphy's would-be king, is sitting in an open file with a rook. That's very dangerous. So, you know, a smart player would step aside, but then this other rook could come. Whoa! So a smart player would put another piece in the way and then take back. And what we see is white still has, you know, is ahead by 2 pawns, right? They're ahead by 2 pawns. But look at their pieces compared to black's pieces. Interesting. Interesting. Because at first glance, and let's go back to the position at hand here. At first glance, let's see, where were we? Go back in time. So at first glance, after ex d4, oh wait, that's the wrong one. Hang on. I'm lost in my own notes. Lost in my own variations. Coach Chris. Well, there's one way. No. That's the exchange. A6. And then bishop a4 should be the main. This is the problem. Promote that variation. b5, the Caro. Bishop b3. White's happy. They get their bishop on the long diagonal. Bishop c5. c3, Morphy plays this like the Italian. d6. d4. And then here's the mistake again. When you're being forked like this, you really want to just take and give yourself extra possibilities for your bishop. Get rid of you know, you don't want to leave white with the 2 center pawns. But they retreat, which loses time. And white has the 2 center pawns. And then we have the EX, here we go. The EX, and then right here, what I am saying is this looks bad at first glance. It looks bad at first glance. But black's pieces get activated quicker from this position. And the speed at which they get activated is very dangerous. And white is left defending. So I think the Allies would have had a better chance had they embarked on that. But it looked worse. It looked worse. To, like, unless you deeply analyze it by moving pieces on a chessboard, it's going to look worse to most people. So they played queen e7, which puts the queen in the same file as white's king in a position where the center is rapidly opening. And so it looked better unless you deeply analyze it. And here Morphy does something quite uncharacteristic. Uncharacteristic of Paul Morphy. Everybody who's a Paul Morphy fan should be expecting like bishop g5, right? Everybody who's a Paul Morphy fan should be expecting bishop g5. However, Paul Morphy moves the same piece twice in the opening. Very uncharacteristic of him. And I think we can learn a lot from this game because he plays some uncharacteristic Paul Morphy moves. He's using the Ruy Lopez, which isn't one of his main weapons, and he's maneuvering before finishing developing, which is very uncharacteristic for Paul Morphy. So this is a nice pin, no doubt. And we're going to see that this becomes a key idea in this game, and we'll watch that unfold. But real fast, had he played the bishop g5, I think you're almost forcing black to then move ready to block, and this opens our diagonal, creates all kinds of problems for black, right? And then, you know, white could actually move here because they're threatening the queen. It's a bigger threat. Black can take back. And then maybe you save your bishop, right? This is what fans of, you know, Paul Morphy would come to expect from a Morphy game. Maybe queen takes e4, and then you can develop your knight with a threat, maybe, or to just take back. White's got 3 pieces in the game, and black only has 2. Very, very exciting stuff. You know, if I was black, I might play bishop b7 here instead of just taking. Because if you take, when the king moves out of the way, then immediately there's this threat, right? It's not as good as you think. All right, but I digress. Let us go back. Morphy plays the uncharacteristic for Paul Morphy, bishop d5. It's a perfectly fine move. It just doesn't match what we would expect from Paul Morphy during his career. I've spent a lot of time studying his games, and it's so uncharacteristic. So this knight is like sitting here for free and pinned, so they put a bishop. But now the knight, instead of being pinned to the rook, is pinned to the bishop. See that? So it doesn't quite get them out of all their trouble. It is an improvement. And now Morphy plays bishop g5. Terrific. Black plays f6. And probably shouldn't have. That's moving Freddy. You never want to move Freddy, the f-pawn, in a defensive way if you can avoid it. Probably better is like queen d7, and then Morphy could just castle, and he's looking pretty good, I gotta say. Even with the improvement, he's looking pretty good. Putting the queen back in the file with the king, continuing to open up the center. And then you could play a4, breaking open the other side as well. This is still not terribly happy for black. It's not terribly happy for black. If they castle, maybe knight a3, developing, putting more pressure here, right? We gotta like white's position better. They're up a pawn. They just need to move their queen to a useful square, and then their rooks are unified. They have a pawn in the center. Black doesn't have a pawn in the center. But white's better. All right. So back to the game, though. The Allies played f6. So if we're keeping score at home, this might be their second mistake. But their big mistake simply was just not exchanging the e for the e5 for d4 when they were being forked in the opening. Let's see. So, yeah, Morphy takes. They take back with the knight. Now this knight is pinned, and this knight is pinned. Let me highlight the two knights. Bishops love to pin knights. White castles. And then the Allies step out of the pin. They step out of the pin. Queen d7. And they could have tried castling, I suppose, right? They could have tried castling. I think Morphy would have immediately played a4. And then by castling, they're actually defending this bishop, though, so they could play knight e5 here. And this is kind of wild and exciting, right? Because this is a threatened check, and this is a threatened check. So we have two check captures on the board. When you have two check captures in different directions, we like to call that position tactically rich. Ax b5, Ax b5 opens up White's rook. Bishop takes b7 is a check. King takes b7. And then Morphy could move a knight closer to the quadrant of Black's king. Queen could still step out of the pin at this point, and White could develop their other knight. Again, I like White's position better here. I like White's position better. This knight's still pinned. Rook has control of the A file. The king has lost its defense. White's king's very safe. I like it better. So even with these little improvements, the Allies are still in trouble. All right, so Queen d7. And let's see what Morphy does. Let's see. Let me check my screens real fast. Awesome. Awesome. We still see everything. Where am I? Oh, 12, Queen d7. What does Morphy do? He takes the knight. This is beautiful. This is beautiful. Because when they do this, with this already gone, when they take back, with the f-pawn already gone, it opens up this kind of diagonal, and there's no way to block the check from the queen. So he's exposing Black's king to another type of threat. It's already somewhat exposed to a threat down the e-file, but he's in this exchange, he's forcing this to move out of the way, and there's nothing if a queen gets to h5 that can block effectively, because our bishop is already guarding f7. So Black plays king d. No, they don't. No, they don't. They must take back, right? What are you doing, Chris? They don't do that. That would be that would even be an impossible move. They have to take back. What have I done? Oh, okay. Here we go. Yes, I found myself for real this time. GXFX. And then Morphy plays knight d4. This is perhaps my favorite move in the entire game. He's adding pressure to c6 while simultaneously opening up this diagonal for the queen to move to h5 and deliver the check. And there's also a neat trap here, and I'll show you this trap in a second. Let me show you what Black does, and then I'll show you the trap. Bishop takes d4 is what they do. But some of you might be saying, what happens if they castle? Well, they lose their queen. Their queen gets pinned to the king. So what does Black do? then, because this knight is creating so much trouble that they can't castle queenside because of the pin. They would like to take it, but then they lose their bishop because of the pin. So this is why they play bishop takes d4 here. Like I said, these allies are pretty good chess players. They're just up against Paul Morphy. But again, bishop takes d4 means, yeah, they can castle queenside if Morphy doesn't do this. But of course, Morphy plays queen h5 check, and there's going to be no castling for black today. No castling. King d8. And then he takes back, cx d4. And there he has two pawns in the center. And black's in no position to counter this in any way, because that's still pinned. So black moves his king over one square. He can't castle, but this defends the bishop. Kind of clever. And then Morphy puts a rook in the c-file, adding pressure to the knight and putting it in the same file as black's king. And let me catch up to my notes here. Let's see. Black plays knight takes d4 because he can now. Remember? This is defended like this, right? But then there's bishop takes b7, king takes b7. Queen says check and fork. Knight can return. And now we see kind of the beauty of adding this rook. Remember, he put the bishop here to create this pin a long time ago. Now the queen's doing the pin. And by putting the rook in the c-file, there's already two things on the knight, which means this queen is glued to defending this knight instead of doing something more active. And, oh yeah, my second favorite move of this entire game is a4 right here. It's just beautiful. It's just a beautiful, beautiful, powerful move. He's giving his queen's rook scope to come up to the third rank and maybe come over and add pressure. That it's hard to deal with that. And at the same time, he's kind of taken advantage of the fact that he's creating threats that would further expose black's king. But this is kind of a hidden tactic. A hidden tactic. With two attackers on the pin knight and two defenders on the pin knight, Morphy is threatening to do this by playing a4. It's really nice. My second favorite move of the entire game. Black plays king b6, stepping out of the pin. If he can just move the knight, then all these extra threats aren't so worrisome. Well, Morphy says, not so fast, allies. Not so fast. King goes back to b7. Rook goes to a3. Elevator up. And the allies resign, as there is legit nothing they can do to stop this knight from being acquired. They resign here. I mean, what would I do in this kind of situation? It's really hard. It's really hard to say. I mean, I might do something like this, and this way, maybe I get this pawn, at least for the knight. But once this rook moves over, you're gonna lose the knight. You can come up here, and then smack, boom, smack. And you don't want to do this right away, because they're going to get this pawn with check, the 7th rank with check, so you have to do that. And white has 2 rooks and a knight, black only has 2 rooks. And so that's why the allies resign. Let's go back to the key point, which came early in the game. Let's review some of our ideas as we go. All right, so we talked a lot about Ruy-Lopez opening. We have the Ruy-Lopez, the Morphy defense. not playing the exchange variation. The Caro variation of the Morphy defense. Black gets their bishop out. Both bishops are threatening the belly buttons. And then c3, preparing d4. d6, fine move. d4. And then here's like a key mistake. Here's a key mistake. Just bishop b6. I think, you know, just taking is the important thing to do. And then you can figure out what you want to do, right? Maybe you want to retreat. Maybe you want to say check. You can figure it out. But you've created a diagonal that you can use against your opponent's king. And you've eliminated the possibility of losing your right to castle because you eliminated the fork. This fork right here. So most often when you're in this kind of position, just go ahead and do that. They play bishop b6. It's an okay move. But then correct here is actually just losing the right to castle. Very few people are going to do that. And then Morphy plays the uncharacteristic move. Getting this pin. He's going to use pins on c6 to win this game. It's like a lesson in pinning the knight and the advantages of it. There's another pin knight, castle, queen d7, gets out of one pin. And then this move's important. It's important because it drags this pawn over, and this pawn's not here. See, if black's pawn is still here, when the queen comes out and says check, then they can just block, right? Now they can't. Knight moves closer, adding pressure to the c6 pin, but opening up the diagonal for the queen to come and say check. And again, they just can't do this here, right? They can't escape by castling. If it wasn't for that, they could totally do that, because then they'd be defending this. They get their king out of the way of this, you know, check, but they cannot because the knight's there. So they get rid of the knight, but then the check comes. Then he takes back 2 pawns in the center, defending the bishop on b7. This is another uncharacteristic move of Morphy. I mean, we would expect him to be developing this knight. In so many Morphy games, the queen's knight ends up going on a exquisite journey to the quadrant of the king. And then this one, it is left on b1. He could have played this entire game pretty much without this knight, right? It's fascinating because Morphy's so good at developing. He's so good at developing, but he just doesn't touch this knight. Very uncharacteristic, but very revealing. Very revealing into the mind of Paul Morphy. I hope you enjoyed this this brief lesson on the Ruy Lopez opening and Paul Morphy versus the Allies, 1859. It is not a game that is talked about much. It's not one of his most accurate games, his being Paul Morphy, but it really gives us insight into one of the brightest stars in chess history. We see him play an opening that he doesn't is not his favorite, and then we see him not deploy a piece, the knight on b1, the queen's knight, which is one of his favorite pieces. If you play through 100 Paul Morphy games, you'll see that piece doing fantastic things. So we can learn a lot. We can learn a lot from this game. I'll probably end up posting the notes to this lesson up on the blog at dailychessmusings.com. So if you want to go back through the game and see all the notes from this video lesson, You can do that at dailychessmusings.com. Don't forget to, if you're checking this out for the first time, please give it a subscription on YouTube and hit the like button. My name is Chris Torres, and I will see you again.